The Killer Instinct SWAT X1. Is this crossbow still a good crossbow in 2025? I just got done with my second season, my 15th season hunting with a crossbow, but my second season hunting with this crossbow, the Killer Instinct SWAT X1. Well, not exactly this exact crossbow, because I've had a few of these different crossbows run through the kingdom of Bunjie now, haven't I? Let's talk about that in this video. I have 3 of these crossbows. This one, of course, is the Patriot. I love this crossbow. Had a really good run with this one this season. This is the crossbow that replaced the Enforcer. You'll remember last year I had the Enforcer. And here you see the Enforcer. When have you ever seen a brand new Killer Instinct SWAT X1 with the tag on it, but with Enforcer grips, huh? Thin blue line grips. These are 1911 style grips added onto this crossbow. Little story behind this. You will remember that last year, 2023, had a great season with the Enforcer. I had the great fortune of shooting a really nice buck in Maryland, shot a really nice buck in Pennsylvania with that crossbow. Then I took it to Manitoba, killed a bear in Manitoba. You can't beat it. That is an historic season for anybody, right? I think I just really love how that worked out. But then getting ready for the 2024 season, getting ready to head for Maryland on my early season crossbow hunts for whitetail deer, and had some problems with the Enforcer, didn't I? I talked about that in previous videos. I never really gave you the whole story because I didn't know exactly what the problem was, but I will tell you that now. With that crossbow, despite all of its great successes and all the fun that I had with that crossbow, I was in the backyard getting ready to go to Maryland, sighting it in, shooting it a couple of times, shot it 20, okay, it was right on at 20. Went to take a follow-up shot to test it, testing different arrows, that sort of thing. I went to pull the trigger and realized the safety was on. Okay, so no big deal. That happens from time to time, right? You're kind of in a rush, you're in a routine, you're in a rhythm of loading and firing and loading and firing and all that. And I went to move the safety from safe to fire, and when I went back to shoot, I went to pull the trigger, and all my finger did was touch that trigger, and boom, the crossbow fired. It fired. It shot the arrow. And it was like not the regular trigger. Do you understand? It was like a hair trigger, the hairiest of hair triggers, if you know what I'm saying. Like it went off with almost no input from me whatsoever. And that scared me a great deal. Now, fortunately, it was sitting in the Bog Death Grip, and it was pretty much aimed at the target. The shot hit the target. I didn't lose an arrow or anything like that. It didn't go soaring off in the distance, but it discouraged me from shooting it any further. You understand what I'm saying? So all of a sudden, that kind of put the 2024 season in jeopardy for me. I sent the Enforcer to Killer Instinct, and they looked it over, and they found nothing abnormal about the trigger. I feel comfortable telling you that now because I didn't want you to think that, oh man, the SWAT X1s, there's a problem with the triggers or anything like that. There was some kind of inconsistency with my trigger, and that's why I was just worried about it, and I sent it back. They didn't find anything wrong with it. They did inspect it, but they parted it out and sent me this one to replace it. So this is not the original Enforcer. It is another crossbow that they put together for me, and they switched the grips out for me, and I really appreciate it. Killer Instinct, hats off to you. What a great company. That's customer service. A lot of people over this past season on the Facebook and in the forums and all that good stuff have complained about Killer Instinct's customer service. And I get that. Recognizing that it's during the hunting season and that Killer Instinct sells an awful lot of crossbows, they really do. They got a lot of business going on that time of year. When I look at the forums, I look at the Facebook pages, all that good stuff, people are giving you the same complaints about the other manufacturers as well. Even Excalibur, which historically has a fantastic track record of customer service. They really do. But during the hunting season, you got to expect a little bit of a delay. You also look at the forums and you look at the Facebook pages and you hear a lot of people complain about Killer Instinct products in general. But I think that has to do a lot with the fact that they sell a lot of crossbows, right? There's a lot of Killer Instinct products out there, and therefore a larger number of people who are going to have problems with them and complain about them in all the public forums. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a higher percentage, that Killer Instinct in general is a lesser product in any way. It just means more people are going to complain about them because there's more people to complain about them. Contrast that with Scorpid, right? This is the Scorpid Deathstalker Bunjie 3.0, the slick black Cadillac. Remember this guy? What a heck of a crossbow this is. When is the last time you heard anybody complain about their Scorpid? Not very often. Not very often. But keep in mind, almost nobody has a Scorpid, you know, in comparison to Barnett's or the Killer Instincts or the Center Points, right? So I think it's just a matter of numbers. I would not let forums or Facebook or anything like that necessarily discourage me from owning a Killer Instinct product versus another product. You got to take all this stuff into consideration and sort of evaluate it as you think about it. Other than that trigger issue with the Enforcer, I really haven't had problems with these crossbows. Once they are sighted in, they tend to hold their accuracy with no problem at all, and they've been fairly good on strings and cables. You got to watch these crossbows because right around here, there's not a lot of clearance, and I think what happens is if you're cocking and shooting your crossbow, it wears out the loops right here, the serving around the loops, and you'll start to see them get fuzzy. Now, these look really, really good, so there's no issues with this one whatsoever. This has been on here. These strings have been on here since I received this from the company in September, and they don't show any wear there. But you do want to watch out for that. There is a lot of people that will say you got to sand down some burrs on the cams or something like that. Never had that issue. Not going to worry about that unless I start seeing string wear. I will say, however, this one, brand new, you know, completed a season. It's been to Maryland a couple of times, hunted a lot here in Pennsylvania, both on state game lands and on private property. I had a full season with these string now that season is complete, and there is some wear on the actual center serving, though. If I look in there, I can see where that serving is starting to unravel. So I'm going to change the string on this one. Now, again, these came with the strings from the company, and I can't swear that they're the updated modern string. Some people on the forums are saying you got to switch to custom strings on these crossbows, and then they'll wear better. But for me, if I get a season out of a string, I don't care. That doesn't bother me in any way. I can change the string. I now have a press, and I'm able to change the string. Speaking of changing strings, this is a yet unnamed SWAT X1. It's number 3 in my arsenal of SWAT X1 crossbows. I love the grips on this. I just don't have a name for it yet. Got some ideas. But this one I bought used, and it came with a string that was in perfectly good shape. It was just the wrong color. So I wanted a black string, I want them all to match. That's why I changed the string. But I was able to do that without too much trouble using a press that I purchased. And I will do a video on that down the road on changing the strings on crossbows and some things to look for and look out for. I will say changing the string on this was a piece of cake. With a press, it's actually, I'm an Excalibur guy originally, right? And I've changed the string on Bunjie and Bunjie Junior dozens of times over the years. I did a video where I changed the string on Bunjie, the original Bunjie. I shot it first, it was dead on, changed the string to a new string, shot it, dead on, right? Like it's just simple. The newer Excaliburs, like this fella here, Genevieve's crossbow, Bunjie Junior. This is a 355 micro suppressor. Changing the strings on these is a little bit tougher. You got to crank it back. You've got a string changing aid that goes on here, but you know, I don't like put my fingers in here. There's a lot of pressure on these when they're cocked back. There's nothing holding it other than the string changer device, right? And that can make you a little bit uncomfortable. Genevieve's the one that cranks it back, and I'm the one that's sticking his fingers in there in the danger zone, changing the string and tightening it up and everything else. Never had a problem with it. It's just a little unnerving because there's nothing holding it. With a press, you're actually holding the limbs in, and they can't go anywhere. So I feel really good getting my fingers in there. It's a lot easier to work on them with a press. This crossbow, the Scorpid, you actually don't need a press. You've seen me do videos where you pull the string back by hand, stick a dowel rod in here, and actually lock the cams, and that way you're able to change the string and work on everything else. That's pretty convenient. You know, you don't necessarily need a press with it at all with this crossbow, despite the fact that it's a compound crossbow. The difference is there's a lot of string here, right? And if you look at the strings on the SWAT X1, they're mostly serving, and they don't stretch, they don't unravel, you don't get that string creep that you would get with other crossbows. And with the cables, there isn't a lot of room for error. With this crossbow, getting this in time, once you change it, is a tremendous amount of work. It requires you to twist, redo it, retwist it, untwist it, and keep tweaking one side versus the other until you get all the measurements right. And that's probably consistent with a lot of the compound crossbows out there when you're changing strings and cables. With the SWAT X1, that's not the case. It's mostly serving, okay? The cables are almost entirely serving, and there isn't a lot of twist that can go on with those. Similarly, the string only has a little bit right here that is actual string, exposed string. So you can tighten it a little bit, loosen it a little bit, but there isn't a lot to do with that. Also with these crossbows, the SWAT X1, what makes them nice is that enclosed barrel. The arrow is seated in here and comes out of an enclosed barrel. So there isn't a lot of room for that. In fact, there's almost no room for that arrow to be pushed left or right, up or down as it's going down the rail. The timing of the cams is less important on these crossbows and almost insignificant, I will tell you that, because they're kind of locked right in place. And with the barrel, it can't push it in the wrong direction, right? It can't put more tension on one side versus the other because that barrel is going to hold that arrow straight the entire way down the rail. You can see that in practice. Slow motion videos from last year show that very clearly. The arrows come out of this like a dart. They're not spinning. They're not doing anything. They're just going down range. And they're deadly accurate, right? For me, shooting 60 yards with this thing out to that distance, very easy for me to sight it in and expect it to remain sighted in all season long. Unlike the Scorpion, however, and unlike a lot of the compound crossbows, there is no cable slide on the SWAT X1. There's a chance for those cables to rub each other and to rub the crossbow. I can tell you I haven't had any problems there, but it just seems like you'd be having problems there. Now I do lube these with Trident grease, done a video on that. I lube it real good wherever the serving part is. Stick the brush right there, I have little paint brushes, put that stuff in there and lube it good. I was at one time lubing the rail as well. I stopped doing that because it occurred to me that this is an enclosed barrel and some of that stuff can get gummed up in there. Did that affect my trigger? I don't know. Maybe it did. I can see how it would, or at least in my head, I can see how that might affect the inner workings of a crossbow like this. So I keep that Trident grease and everything else out of there. I do put it on the strings and cables anywhere there's servings, and then I cock it, and I do the same thing, put that Trident grease on all of the serving portions of it that are exposed after you cock it. Then I shoot it, wipe it down with a cotton rag, and I am good to go. When I talk about grips, I talk about these Enforcer grips. An AR-15 grip comes on here. If you're interested in Jim's AR-15 grips, just to replace them on your SWAT X1 or any other crossbow, I will put a link in the description to those as well. I like the ability to switch these out. You got a lot of options for 1911s. So I bought a converter, and I'll put a link in the description. You put the converter on here and you can buy the grips that you like off of eBay, any of them that you like. And they fit my hands perfect. I got big hands, so it's like I need a fatter grip like this. It really helps. It helps me get the perfect amount of distance between the butt of the grip and where my trigger finger is, okay? That's the right distance for me. It doesn't affect the length of pull any, but it's a nice setup and it's a good fit for me. These crossbows, it just fits. It just fits me good. You know what I mean? It's just a good fit. My hand, where this is designed, my elbow ends up right on my rib cage, and it just provides me with perfect balance. It's just a perfectly designed crossbow. Contrast that with this guy. Now, this is the Black Widow, the Raven R29X. This is a nice crossbow. There's some stuff I like about this, more videos coming. Had our ups and downs, had a rough start with this crossbow, now didn't we? But nonetheless, it is a good product, I will say that. But one of the things I don't like about it, this grip is very comfortable, but the trigger should be clear up here instead of here, because the distance, this distance right here is too shallow. Like, look at my hand. That's just me holding it, right? My finger, that's too much. The trigger should be up here where I'm pulling it, not back here where I have to figure out how to get my hand. I mean, who shoots a crossbow like this is, you can put a little shoe on here and add some distance, but you can't add a whole inch, and it needs like an inch, you know what I'm saying? That's one of my complaints about this crossbow in terms of the balance, the design, that sort of thing. Another reason why I think the SWAT X1 is superior to this. You're seeing all the crossbows in this video, aren't you? But this crossbow will get more airtime going forward. We're going to really work on this crossbow in the spring and shoot it a lot more and get our money's worth out of this thing. I bought it on sale. That was the reason I bought it. I wouldn't otherwise buy a crossbow this expensive. But one thing I got to say about this crossbow, though, and this is the downside of the SWAT X1, is the crank. right? I don't like add-on cranks. I think that's the reason I never liked cranks. You've heard me say that over and over on this channel. This has a built-in crank, and I gotta tell you, it's pretty sweet. Just slide it down, and you don't have to go get an extra piece of equipment, the handle, but other than the handle, you don't need an extra piece of equipment. That's really nice compared to the SWAT X1, where at the end of a hunt, you have to shoot it with a decocking arrow. Now, that's not too much of an inconvenience. I have a 5-arrow quiver. I just throw a decocking arrow in there, and I haven't had too much trouble, but I keep forgetting the decocking arrow. That's kind of a nuisance. I hunted enough this year that I actually wore out my decocking arrow. So that's an issue, right? I think crossbows in this day and age should be able to be decocked. You know, the more I think about it, for a hunting crossbow, you need to be able to decock it at the end of a hunt if you don't shoot something. And this, obviously, you can decock. That's pretty nice. To decock this one, you have to essentially take out the arrow that's in here. So you got a sharp broadhead here protruding, right? And you got to tip it up like this. You got to handle the switch, lean that switch forward and let that arrow slide out, but not all the way. And before it falls out, grab it and slide it the rest of the way out. You don't want your fingers on that broadhead. You don't really want your fingers, if this were to go off, you wouldn't want your fingers anywhere near it. But once you get that going, get that broadhead out there far enough, you can grab it and then just pull that arrow out by the shaft. Then set that down or put it back in the quiver or whatever you're doing. It's kind of hard to do in a tree stand where you got limited space. And then you get your decocking arrow out and you make sure you got the nock lined up here and it's dark and everything else. But you got to feed that in there, get that decocking arrow set, and then use the lever to load it like this, which is pretty sweet. You can feel it fall down in there. And once that's set in there, then you can decock and fire the crossbow. Not a big deal. I don't like to put my fingers in there, and I don't like to have to remember when I get down from the tree to go find that arrow and take it out of there. And Luminox don't like decocking arrows because they stop so fast. It kind of ruins those Luminox pretty fast. So even putting a Luminox on there to sort of see that at dark and remember to get that decocking arrow, that's not even as effective. So it's just one of those things I don't like about it. And it's funny to hear me say that because the first year I was doing it, I didn't care. Then I got that Raven and all of a sudden I care about that. Like it's starting to make sense to me now. So it may or may not be a big issue to you. Last thing I'm going to show you about these, talk about, is the stirrup, right? You saw me on the first ones that I was using. I switched out this stirrup to a center point stirrup, which basically stayed solid there or solid there so you could stand it up. And it was a good design. I did like it. But I've actually come to like the Killer Instinct stirrup more. And for that reason, this one, the Patriot here, I have, and on all three of them, I have the Killer Instinct, the original stirrups, back on them. Really cool. They just basically slide down like this. You just put them down or up, and they stay pretty solid once you get the balance right. There are, I noticed, and a friend of Bunjie Jim showed me this, but forgive the mud and stuff on this thing. That's what a used crossbow is supposed to look like. There are bolts right here that affix this to the little plate, right? But then they have, in addition to that, if you look, there are two little screws right here. Right there. I don't know if you can see them. Two little screws. And those two little screws are Allen wrench screws. You can tighten those down and they will make it a little firmer. They don't get, in my experience, tight enough to not allow this to move, but they do firm it up pretty good. Pretty good setup. You really got to love this setup. It's perfect for the Burris Oracle X, which will be the subject of my next video, I'm thinking. So when you throw it on there, you got a perfect balance. It's just perfect. You know, the cheek weld is perfect, everything. And it complements that Burris Oracle X very nicely, which is a game changer for me. I don't use that word much. Even the Bluetooth remote, look where that's positioned there. It's perfect for my thumb to get that Bluetooth remote. It just falls right in place. When I pick up the crossbow, my thumb is already positioned perfectly. I can get right in there good and line it up and do it. So Burris Oracle X, we'll talk a little bit more about that. I've been using it now for 2 or 3 years. 3 years, actually. This is my 3rd season with the Burris Oracle X. Wow, how time flies. But we'll talk about that in the next video. Is it the right crossbow for you in 2025? Well, probably not. When I look online, I can't buy new ones. I can't find them, right? So if you get your hands on one, with the enclosed barrel and this overall setup and all the things that I've talked about in the various videos on this crossbow, it's a piece of crossbow history that you might want to get your hands on. And I am very happy to have 3 of them going forward into the next year. So I do think it's a solid hunting option going into 2025. Let me know your thoughts. In 2025, this one's going to get a name. And we're going to start talking about new crossbows. It is that time of year when all the new crossbows, all the manufacturers are going to start releasing new models, and we will look at those new models and talk about them right here on Death by Bunjie. Please join me. And until next time, all hail Bunjie.